This is episode 30 of Standing Out. Standing Out is a remarkable interview-style podcast with the intention to highlight women and men making outstanding contributions in their field. This podcast is generously sponsored by Think Global. Think Global is a business advisory firm working with women entrepreneurs around the globe to scale their businesses to the next level. Today, I'd like to welcome Bodo Hoenen. Bodo is a social entrepreneur and EdTech innovator working on high scalability, high impact projects that radically rethinking education and empower all children, especially those most underserved. Motivated by his young children's self-directed learning, he founded Dev4X with a vision to create a personalized digital learning platform to revolutionize education. Bodo, thanks for being here.
Hello, thank you. It's nice being here.
Yeah. So, okay, let's start with that piece. So, this idea basically came from seeing the capacity that your children have to learn and how it's self-directed, right? So, when did you notice this in your children?
Well, from a very young age, my daughter loves to learn about things that she's really passionate about. So. Unlike the things that she tends to learn at school, she prefers to learn about spaceships and fairies and tree houses. And so focused a lot around providing her information and providing activities around things that she was really interested in. And that's one of the reasons or one of the key ideas that kicked the project off.
What did you like? And so your daughter's 5, right?
She's 5.5 now.
Okay. So was she in preschool and you were noticing that she just wasn't engaging, or like how did that come up that you noticed the difference between when she does something self-directed, she's more engaged than otherwise? Yeah,
so it started off a lot earlier than that. If I recall back my own education, I had a pretty terrible education. I disliked school, and it was really boring and very monotonous for myself. And this was back in South Africa. And when my daughter was born, we were looking at schools in the area and looking at preschools and kindergarten. And she started to go to some preschools. And the focus there was already on trying to prepare the kids for the rigors of first grade, second grade, trying to get them to read their letters, write the words, do basic mathematics, understand the concepts. And there was very little to do with what the kids were really passionate about and curious about. And that's really how it got started. So instead of drilling through to her the mathematics and the linguistic portions of the curriculum that are so prominent here, we focused on trying to provide her learning that is really that inspires her and very creative for her.
And that is so interesting. And I notice in my kids too, I would say I see a similar thing. And for example, both kids actually happen to like oceans, and they want to know everything about the ocean, but they want to know what they want to know. You know what I mean? like my son, for example, he just wants to know more and more about sharks, and at some point we'll know every species and breed or whatever you would call it of sharks. And then my daughter, of course, she wants to know like the seahorses and the mermaids and the whatever else about oceans. Our son's school actually did something really cool recently that I was so interested in. They called it Genius Hour, and I guess have you heard of that? Yeah. So for the listeners that don't know, Genius Hour, it's kind of based off of this innovation thing that they do at Google, from what I understand, where 20% of the team's time is just spent working on projects that they're really, really interested in. And so with this Genius Hour, my son's in first grade, he was able to pick some topic, and I think it amounted to like an hour or 2 a week. He was just able to research. So he chose Minecraft swords and now like knows so much about Minecraft swords, which may not be a real life skill, but what is a real life skill is he's 7. He now knows how to research, he knows how to find information, and knows how to keep asking more questions after something is answered. And I think that is really incredible.
And just to provide some context maybe for the listeners about Dev4X, we focusing on children that don't have any access to school. So Dev4X particularly works with children in refugee camps, conflict zones, or in disaster areas where children don't have access to schools or to teachers. And so we need to provide them the tools and the ability for them to be able to take their learning into their own hands. And we do that by focusing on what they're passionate about, by focusing on their own curiosity and building or providing them the tools that allow them to take their learning into their own hands.
First, so let's start there. So when you're working, let's say with children in a refugee camp, how are you communicating with them and getting your resources into the camp?
So at the moment we're doing pilot studies, and this is unlike the way that we intend to deploy in a more live environment. So at the moment we're focusing, we work directly with the communities around the refugee camps, but ultimately we're developing this to be as low friction as possible. It's an app that you can download onto your tablet devices, onto low-cost tablets and phones, and simply provide the children that are completely illiterate, completely technological illiterate, and allow them to start to learn. So we devised a UI UX that allows kids to pick these tablets up without any instruction or guidance and start to learn and start to explore the learning around them. And ultimately, it's designed to be able to use by families that may not be able to go to school, or they're donated tablets from NGOs, or they have there's a high rate of adoption of smartphones, low-cost smartphones in the developing world, and so we want to leverage that.
So what do you find? With the platform, how do you sort of decipher or find what these children are interested in?
We provide them a map of learning, a learning map, which allows them to explore what there is to learn. So it's a visual map which shows them everything that they could possibly learn and how they're all connected to one another. So at a very granular level, we build a map out of concepts, out of learning concepts, which are traditionally defined as curriculum.
Okay.
But in traditional schools, curriculum is pretty linear.
Yeah.
You have to go down a particular path. But on the map, it allows you to explore and allows you to go down different pathways, allows you to see things that you're really interested in. And so, for example, if a child is interested in becoming a mechanic, they may look at the concepts related to mechanic, but see all of the things that they need to learn from where they are now until they are able to understand the mechanical type concepts and understand what they need to learn in between. So this provides them context about what to learn and how to get to where they want to be.
What drew you, like looking at your children's own experience of self-directed learning, what drew you into providing something for underserved children?
I grew up in the developing world. I left there when I was 18. One of the reasons why I really disliked school there is even more so there than here. The focus is on factory schools, the one-size-fits-all factory type education. It's something that is very prevalent in the developing world, and it's something that's destroying the creativity of the kids that need it most.
You don't know this about me, but I've been to South Africa, and I actually had an opportunity to tour a school in South Africa. And I think I can, in my 20 minutes that I was there or so, I think I can totally support what you're saying in that it's a one size fits all. And just by arriving, I could tell that in like everything was so, I don't want to say robotic, but I just can't think of another word, but everyone's answers were all the same at the same time. Like it was very in unison. And And I agree. Like I did not see a lot of creativity or self-directed learning, or, you know, some things that you're talking about. What, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really stunting the development of the developing world,
Right.
especially for the kids that are not going to be able to get into the types of jobs that we have here. These kids will need to be highly creative and entrepreneurial in order to make a living for themselves. So there, as even more so than here, these kids need to be highly creative and problem solvers. Yeah.
So what are you seeing in the pilot programs you're running, whether it's quantitative or qualitative? What are you seeing that you're feeling like, hey, these are some successes. This is really making a difference.
Yeah, these kids are really hungry for learning,
Mm-hmm.
especially the young girls who, due to cultural reasons, aren't really given the opportunity to go to school. They're really hungry to learn, and once they know something, they're really hungry to teach each other, and that's what we're leveraging. So we're encouraging children to learn through self-directed learning, but then also encouraging them to teach each other. So that way we can propagate learning throughout the community without necessarily having access to formal teachers in schooling and things like that.
That is so interesting that you're seeing that they are excited to teach other people.
Absolutely, yeah.
I have actually, what is that? There's this old, I think it may have been a commercial or marketing campaign, but it was something, like show me, teach me. I don't know what it was. I'm not articulating it very well, but it kind of went off this idea of once you learn how to do it, if you can then teach someone else how to do it, you're having a greater mastery of what you already knew.
Absolutely.
They did it in much better marketing words than I just did, but that was kind of like the bottom line of it. So that's really interesting. Where do you think, where do you think you're going with this? Do you have more pilot programs that you need to implement, or like what's the next step?
Yeah, the approach we're taking is very non-traditional and very controversial in some instances. So raising funds for this project is incredibly difficult. What we're doing at the moment is we're trying to get enough of a base of evidence to be able to go to large foundations and impact investors to raise the real money we need. That's really the next stage.
Can I just touch on that? Why is raising funds for this project difficult?
We intentionally are staying away from teaching the traditional curriculum.
Okay.
So as an example, we could.
Is that where more funds are going? Is EdTech for traditional curriculum, right?
Yeah. If we can educate kids and get them higher standardized test results, then it would be easy for us to get money. But because we're not focusing on that, it's difficult.
I see. How long are you currently raising funds?
Yeah, we already.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to put out there in case anyone listening is attached to this and, interested in talking to you more. So, what do you think, this is kind of a little bit off of your project per se, but just as an entrepreneur and knowing what you're doing in the ed tech arena, what would you say are some of your best kept secrets as far as websites that you love, books, or TED Talks that are really inspiring? Like, what would you share with our listeners?
There was a book called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. It was by, I think, Richard Grumlett. It's a book which goes against the trend which we see a lot of these days, is the lean startup methodology.
Okay.
Lean startup methodology really focuses on marginal improvements, incremental improvements, and allows you to get those improvements very quickly, which is great if that's what you're going for. But if you want to tackle a huge challenge and you want to really disrupt the way things are done, you need to take a long-term approach and a long-term vision on doing something. And his book really was instrumental in thinking around that type of thought process. So, And then, of course, really inspirational TED Talks are from Sir Ken Robinson and Salman Khan and Sugata Mitra. These are all educational TED Talks.
Did you see that one? And maybe you mentioned their name. I can't think of the man's name, but what did he do? I think he brought either some sort of tablet, iPad, smartphones or something to, I believe, an Indian village. And just these children didn't have the knowledge of how to work this, but they basically figured it out. And it was a case for how children's capacity is, basically.
Absolutely. So his name is Sugata Mitra, and he's running the hole in the wall experiments. And he's one of the reasons that I got inspired to do this.
Oh, that's awesome.
A good friend and a mentor on our advisory
board.
Oh,
I didn't even know that. Well, you can tell him his TED Talk has obviously gone viral. A lot of people have seen that. That's good. What would you say is your favorite part of being an entrepreneur?
It's about being able to do something that really matters as opposed to sitting in a cubicle. We have one life, and it's beautiful, and it's you can create a lot of impact and value, and it's lovely to be able to be in control of that.
Yeah, and I think what you're doing really is disruptive. I mean, I think EdTech in general is disruptive, and I can see that in our own lives and how that's impacting our children's school and some teaching methods and things like that. But I think taking this different approach of it's not just getting you great test scores. It's a life skill, and it's being creative and more entrepreneurial and in control of what you're doing. And I think there's some beauty and interesting pieces that come from that. Did you see that recent, I think it was a Finland study. So you know how all schools worldwide are ranked, and I think US is something like 28th or 29th, and Finland is number 1 in this ranking system. I saw an interview recently how Finnish children go to school 4 hours a day, and then they're encouraged to just go out and play the other hours of the day. And what one of the teachers who was interviewed said was, I would so much rather them be outside and play and climb trees. And if they find ants, come in the next day and let's talk about the ants and let's learn about the ants. And I think that's a really fascinating approach.
Absolutely.
She was all about it. Okay, so as we wrap up, I would love to ask you this final question, and that is, what sort of trends or hot topics are personally on your radar that we as the general public may not know about just yet, but you think we're going to know about maybe in a year or two from now?
Honestly, I was thinking about this, but the real thing that I believe is going to happen the next year, and this is related to our project as well as others, is we're going to really understand that children are able to do a lot more than we give them credit to. There's a lot of projects around empowering children from a very young age, and I think this is going to be empowering. There's a lot of schools that are starting the project-based learning approach, changing the way kids learn and interact, and providing them the ability to do some real impactful work from a very young age. And this is going to change the way we educate kids, and it's going to change the way kids are brought up and the way kids think about the world. And so, as a shameless plug, I think that is that is what we're aiming for, and that is one of the things that I'm very confident will happen in the next year.
I can definitely feel and see the pendulum shifting in that direction. I think you're absolutely right. Bodo, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wonderful.